From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Next we have up someone who has a brilliant new book out, and he's just, he does amazing work. You may have heard of a little series, six-volume epic called Scott Pilgrim. Anyone? It's such an amazing work, and what's amazing too is we didn't know what Bryan Lee O'Malley, who's our next guest, what he was working on. We'd get little snippets on Tumblr, social media, a little peek. But here's a guy who's just been a pleasure to watch him evolve as an artist. You may have heard of Lost at Sea, which involves a girl's, young woman's cross-country trip, and sort of a sense of, it also gets into a cat soul. So in some ways it's sort of a reverse Hello Kitty, apparently. But Scott Pilgrim, he said he started it for his friends, and it struck a chord because he has such voice and such style, and he tunes in to truth within a stylistic way. His new one is called Seconds, and it's just a great book. I really recommend it. And again, the Washington Post is a charter sponsor, so Amazon's always a good idea. Anyway, let me welcome Mr. Bryan Lee O'Malley.
Is this for me?
We can sit. Well, thank you so much.
Wow, these lights are really bright.
Right. Well, you've been traveling in the UK, right, for a while?
That's true. They didn't have lights this bright over there.
It's just a darker continent, And this is amazing. To me, it was exciting to finally get to see Seconds, because I kept hearing whisperings what it was about, and actually get to hold it and tell the story of Katie. Katie is this 29-year-old chef. And my first question, she's ambitious, she's hard driving. Some have said she's sort of the reverse Scott Pilgrim, She actually has initiative and sometimes a good sense of herself. But what I'm intrigued with is, I know when I first got syndicated, everyone said, "Are you going to quit your day job?" And it's like, no, people think you've hit pay dirt. When the first Scott Pilgrim book came out, you were working at a restaurant yourself, right? For a time in Toronto?
Yeah, I had to go out and get a job, actually. Yeah. I had quit my previous job to work on Scott Pilgrim, and I thought I was going to be a big shot when it was done. But it didn't happen overnight. So pretty much the next day, I had to go get a job.
Yeah. And so you work at a restaurant and you did everything, or can you talk a little bit about
I did very little. No, a friend of mine worked in the kitchen at a restaurant in Toronto and got me a job there very graciously. I was a food runner, which means I took food and I ran. I brought it from the kitchen to the people, and I didn't really. The only interaction I had to do was like, "Would you like some pepper with that?" So I didn't really have to talk to anyone. I didn't really have to talk to the kitchen either, because the food would just appear and I would just take it. So I was like a food robot. But it was a good place for someone who's like a writer, observational kind of thing. So I worked there for about 6 months, and I kind of came up with the idea for Seconds at the time, which was almost 10 years ago. So it made it very frustrating not to be able to write Seconds until recently.
And you started, the first Scott Pilgrim was published, 10 years ago this month, maybe?
Yeah, August 18th, 2004.
Well, I'd give applause for that achievement, because it's
Thank you.
It's amazing. I just read it over and over and always find new things. And one thing about your work is there's such depth and everything. It's the right word, and you have a sense. Each panel means something, and there's so much to find on every page, and you change page layouts. Do you struggle when you do this, or does it come easily?
It's a bit of both, really.
Yeah.
I think I do have like an aptitude for it, and also at this point I have enough experience with it that it does come more naturally to me than it did before.
Yeah.
I mean, when I look back at Scott Pilgrim, I certainly see stuff that I would have done differently if I was doing it now, but I honestly, I wouldn't go back and do stuff differently. And that's kind of the message of Seconds. It's like, don't worry about it. Just don't redo everything. Just do it once and, live with it.
And one thing that, with Seconds, and to explain if you haven't read the book, the story, Katie works at this restaurant. She wants to open a new restaurant, and she has a relationship that didn't quite work out because of a decision she made. So it's part Groundhog Day, where she's trying to learn from her revisions. There's a morality tale mixed with the supernatural, and maybe a little bit of a, I don't know, Alice in Wonderland or something, or Go Ask Alice with magic mushrooms being the shift. But is this something where, as you had you mapped it out or as you wrote it, did it sort of become clearer?
It's like a mix. With this book in particular, like I had the idea for a long time, but it was still a pretty vague idea. It was a restaurant and a house spirit and magical changes. So yeah, I wrote like a really detailed outline, and I wrote like 4 or 5 drafts of that, and then I started composing comic pages from that, which I found to be a really good process for a huge graphic novel, because I just did the entire book in a very rough form, like sketched, and then once it was kind of all, as I went, I kept editing bits and pieces, but when it was complete, I could see the whole thing in this super rough, horrible, scribbly form, and then fix it as much as possible before I actually committed it to like final artwork.
It is a gorgeous book. It is something where you seem to blend, as we've seen before. There's a manga influence, and yet you see European comics influence. I see things that remind me of some of my favorite French cartoonists. But it's entirely your own style. I look at it, and it's like you have so absorbed it and done it in your own voice, in your own style. Are you aware of influences you're doing it, or at this point in your career, it's like, no, this is just where I'm at?
I'm aware of influences, yeah. Especially when I go from Scott Pilgrim to something totally brand new, like I could kind of take in a whole new realm of influences and that were more appropriate for this story and this style. So yeah, I was reading a lot of European comics. I always have, but I just took more of a cue from them for this one, in terms of the page layouts and even just doing it in full color. It made it feel more European, and yeah, I liked it having a different feeling than Scott Pilgrim.
Yeah. Well, ahead of time, I asked some people I know who are diehard of different ages, some kids, some adults, just a few questions that I would pose to you because I wanted their perspectives too. So I'll just read those. One is, have you, Bryan, ever had an evil ex?
No. I don't really think people are evil.
A mildly nasty ex.
No, even that I haven't. So it was when I set out to do Scott Pilgrim, it was more like other people had more exes than I did. I was not very lucky in love in school age, so I have a very, very short list of exes. So yeah, it was more me coming to terms with like the fact that other people have lives and pasts. And I didn't want the exes to really be that evil. So the exes are not actually that evil. They're just called evil. Most of them are kind of just pushovers, or they're actually kind of nice. Yeah, I guess that's the end of that question.
I'll get this over with, but I'm sure you've been asked this a lot. But I remember a couple of years ago, there was a studio head. I may have been at Show West, a gathering of theater exhibitors, but some ridiculous, the way journalists can be stupid, said, now you've had this run with Cowboys and Aliens and Scott Pilgrim versus the World, not being disappointing. And the studio head said, let me stop you. I'm not going to defend Cowboys and Aliens. There's no defense for that. But he said, Scott Pilgrim versus the World was a good film. And it is. It's an amazing film.
Thank you.
because I have a young relative who we geek out to it. I think I literally watched it 17 times, and we sit there and talk. Literally last week, she's 14, and she's like, now why do you think they made the choice? Okay, you had to go more special effects in the narrative. You got to cut things. And Ramona, it's tough. You don't have the time to make her sympathetic as you do the book. And this is the conversation where we go back and forth and say, would you rather have it be a film that you just as a fan you love, which we do, or a film that does huge box office because you you and Edgar Wright made decisions that kind of sold out? And I think fans love this film.
Well, yeah, apparently they do. Yeah, no, I feel that way too. It's like people always ask me whether I like the film or if I think the film is good, and it's like, it's kind of beside the point because there's so many ways that a movie could be bad, and this one pretty much has none of them. So I'm just so like blessed to actually have a movie that I like and that I respect and that other people respect. Because it could have been a movie that you don't respect at all. You could just take the tagline and do something completely terrible with it, which is what I honestly expected them to do when I set out to option my comic book. But yeah, it turned into something that's really cool, and it's art, and whatever problems it has or whatever, it's like they're intentional, I guess. So it's like I don't care that it didn't do that well. Although the money wouldn't hurt, but I mean, it's like I think like the feeling of it is worth more than any money could have been.
I don't think you're in danger of going back to a restaurant job anytime soon.
Hopefully.
So, I did want to mention, I asked someone in the newsroom, they said, now, if you know that, like if you look at Scott Pilgrim, you have Ramona be, back in the day, the lone delivery person for Amazon. And I think you helped make Amazon cool. And this, in effect, in some ways, this event is being charter sponsored by Jeff Bezos. So I think you being here is a sort of him paying you back for helping make Amazon
Well, I mean,
cool.
they certainly sold a lot of copies of Scott Pilgrim over the years. So that, I think they've kind of paid back in their own way for the free advertising. Yeah, I mean, at the time in Toronto, like we had just gotten Amazon, and I ordered some stuff. This is before like Amazon Prime and stuff. I just ordered stuff, and it would show up like a day later, and I was like, where did this come from? Who brought this? It was like 2003 or something. Like stuff did not happen like that back then. So I was just so mesmerized by that whole thing that I kind of theorized this like magical delivery girl.
Speaking of, is that like the Pixie Dream Girl, but a twist on it?
Yeah.
One thing that's amazing about Seconds is you show things like tweet. This is the first time in a graphic novel I can consciously think of where I'm reading it and taking a selfie, and it's looked like selfie, a little Stefan SNL action there, and moments of tweets where I feel like I'm actually watching people do this the way we tweet and take selfies and other social media in 2014. You capture it in a way I've never seen I've seen in comics, but in a graphic novel before. Are you, as you go, is that something where does it take effort?
I mean, it's part of our culture. It's part of like the language that we use now. Now when I look back at Scott Pilgrim, I'm like, where's all their phones? Because it was not that long ago, but
Yeah.
culture has changed so much, I think, in the past like 5 years. So yeah, I mean, and this Seconds is obviously like ostensibly like a fable, and it takes place in this kind of fairy tale-ish setting, but at the same time, everyone has like iPhones, and it's, I don't know, I feel like you have to, as a writer, you have to engage with modern culture and technology because it's just changing everything.
Yeah, you do it so beautifully. This question came from a young woman, said, all your women are hot, so hot. Are you capable of drawing female characters who are not hot?
I'm glad you specified it came from a woman. I would have been a little more nervous. I just like drawing pretty things. I mean, and that includes girls. And yeah, it's not like, I don't know, you look at a lot of comics and it's like, it's a guys drawing girls just because like they think they're super hot and they like, it's weird, it's a little creepy. But I don't feel like my stuff is quite that way. Like I just think women are cool, and I like drawing them. I like their clothes, and I like their hairstyles and whatever. So it's just like, it's not like guys are less cool. Maybe they are, but I don't know. I just feel like you need more cool women, cool, respectable women in the world of fiction.
Yeah. And
oh, come on.
Absolutely. And because this is in full color, you're able to really show diversity, and it registers to the eye. Another question: in your comics, when there's romantic love, you often add supernatural or metaphysical or alterna worlds. What's the matter? Is normal love just not good enough for you?
Who asked that question? What? Yeah, I don't know how to answer that. I mean, like, love and romance, and it's all just part of, like, human connections, which is really what all my books are about. Just people trying to connect or connecting in different ways. And, yeah, I don't think love specifically is being, like, obfuscated by my magical stuff. I just like weaving the magic into everyday life. And, Second's certainly, like, the magical elements are approached in a very different way than Scott Pilgrim.
Within the book, there's a recipe, and your food drawings, if you want side work, his food drawings are just gorgeous. Hamburgers and other things are just so edible and better than what you see on the cover of the boxes in the store. And but there's a recipe in there, and I was wondering, did you make that dish? Have you tasted that dish? And if it had tasted bad, would you have put a different recipe in seconds?
Well, first of all, I'll shout out to my drawing assistant who helped me on those food drawings, Jason Fisher, who's an amazing cartoonist in his own right, and he's well known for his burger drawings. So that's part of why I got him to help me. Yeah, we've been friends for a long time, but it was great to work with him. And as for that dish, there's a dish that I show being prepared. I don't actually show a recipe in this book, but I show it being prepared. It's like a rabbit thing. A friend of mine actually is like a chef. He used to work at like a really nice restaurant, and I was like, hey, can you just help me come up with something, just anything that looks cool and is like kind of chef-y? And yeah, he came over with 3 rabbit carcasses one day, and I was like, what is happening? And he cooked it in front of me, and I just took pictures, and we ate it. It was really good. He was like, "Oh, I messed up this one thing," and it's like he was like all fretting about it, but it was really good, and it's really unusual. So I'm really glad he could help me out.
Yeah. Well, I encourage people to get it. It's an amazing book. It's such a joy to see it come out. We have time for question and answer, so if people want to come forward, and.
Well,
we'll start on the left. You right here.
If you were to write like another book in the Scott Pilgrim series, would he still be with Ramona, or would he be another evil ex now, or would she be his evil ex?
That's a good question. I don't know. I was thinking about that. I was like, what if I just did a story about Ramona 10 years later and we never mentioned Scott at all? But yeah, I don't know. I have a few vague ideas for things I would maybe one day do with Scott Pilgrim, but I'm not going to do them right now, so I haven't thought about them in too much detail.
Right here on the right.
I was curious to know.
Wait, I got to say, he's wearing a T-shirt that says "Future Evil X," so that's awesome.
Official. It's an official merchandise shirt.
Yeah, I've had this ever since the movie came out.
You've taken it off since then.
I was curious to know, where did you find that fact about Pac-Man? You know, like him used to be called Puck-Man. Where did you find that?
Oh, that's from the movie, actually. I was surprised, too. But it's one of my favorite scenes in the movie, and it's one of my favorite Michael Cera lines in the movie. Just the way he fumbles the line as he delivers it to Ramona is so funny. I die every time I watch it. So yeah, I don't know. Is that true? I think it's true, but I don't know. I never checked it up.
Okay. On the left here.
Hi. I just want to say that I love the books and I love the movie. And I first watched the movie and then I found out about the books from my friend and I borrowed them and I love them. What I want to ask is, how much influence did you have on the movie, and did you get to meet Michael Cera and all the other stars of the movie?
Okay, that's a 2-part question. How much influence did I have on the movie? Well, they optioned the movie between the first and second volumes of the comic. So I was pretty much involved with Edgar Wright and Michael Bacall, the screenwriter, from day one. So we talked all the time about it. So I mean, I think I had a lot of influence, but at the same time, I was like, make a movie. I don't know how to make a movie. You do it. I'm going to work on these comics at the same time. So it was like separate yet together. And yeah, I did meet all of the stars, and they're all really cool, I guess. I don't see most of them on a regular basis. I live in LA now. The one I see the most is Mary Elizabeth Winstead. I don't know why, but that's just how it worked out. Yeah, we're still friends. We're all still friends.
All right, cool. Yes.
This mic is really tall. Okay, so I'm a huge fan of the books, and thank you, because it's helped me through a lot of teenage angst. I just wanted to ask, when you're going through character design, because I love the way you character design, does it often come from like friends or people you're close to, or more like people that you see on the street, or like kind of stuff that's in your head?
I guess it's a big jumble, but I do a lot of looking at fashion and just people, and I don't know. I guess I don't have like a good process for it. It's very intuitive for me, and I do what I feel and what looks right to me. Like for Seconds, Katie and Hazel are the two main characters, and like I knew what they looked like by 2006, and they didn't really change beyond that. And then other characters, even like minor characters, there's a character named Yana who's like a waitress, and I think I did 10 different versions of her. Like they were completely different. So I have no idea. I'm just, I really don't know what I'm doing at all. But thank you for asking.
I will say the fashion is amazing in this. You have an eye for detail, and it just reads immediately. It's so well done.
Yeah, I think it's important in a comic, and also I find it really like rewarding to kind of be able to observe characters over time and in different clothes, and what they wear is like such an expression of their personality.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, so something I thought was really cool about Scott Pilgrim was the whole music scene. And I just wanted to know what some of your like musical influences for that was. I don't know.
Well, I mean, a lot of them made it into the movie, so you can just go download the soundtrack. But I mean, I was in a couple of bands at the time when I was working on Scott Pilgrim, and so like you said at the beginning, like I started Scott Pilgrim just to kind of entertain my bandmates, because I had done Lost at Sea. And it came out, and I showed it to them, and they were like, "This is really sad." So I just wanted to do something that would not make them sad, and that's kind of like part of the genesis for Scott Pilgrim, for having him in the band and everything, because his life was just kind of like a mirror of my life at the time.
Yeah. Yes.
All right. Your books are sort of about different stages in people's lives. And I read Scott Pilgrim when I was much younger than Scott, when I first saw them, and now I'm older, and I really view his character much differently as I've changed. Do you see that with your characters? I mean, I guess Katie is now at sort of a new stage in your life. How does your perspective on your characters change as you've grown?
That's a good question. I mean, with Scott Pilgrim, obviously, it took like 7 years. So when I started, I was like 24, and I was, pretty much in that age range. And then when I finished, I was like, around 30. So at a certain point, it flipped over and became kind of like a nostalgic look at your 20s, which, I don't know, I guess that's just natural when it's a long project like that. So it was kind of like part of the experience of Scott Pilgrim was aging and continuing to write this adventures of this guy who's like 23 and 24 years old. And with Seconds, I knew from the beginning that I wanted it to be like kind of about a boss, or like someone who has responsibility. And I think I had to get to that point in my life before I could actually tell that story. So, I set her age at 29 because I think that's a really ripe age for everyone. So, good luck to everyone who's going to turn 29 one day.
Yes.
Oh, so I think I read in an online interview that when you were drawing Seconds, of the different comics you kind of drew influence from, one of them was sort of Osamu Tezuka's stuff. like sort of how having these sort of cute pictures, but these stories that are actually very heavy. And I just wondered if you had any like favorite Osamu Tezuka manga, like Phoenix or Buddha or anything.
Yeah, this is going to be an obscure question for most people, but Osamu Tezuka is the creator of Astro Boy and a million other things. And he's my favorite cartoonist. Yes, his book Phoenix is one of my favorite comics ever. It's 12 volumes, and it was never finished. He died before he finished it. So it's this kind of like epic cycle that never really gets to the point. And I think it's beautiful that way anyway.
So is like Karma your favorite, like 6, or just the whole thing in general?
Just the whole thing. But actually, Katie's hair was inspired by a volume of that. I think it's 6, Nostalgia. There's a girl with spiky hair, and I was like, this is great. I'm going to use this for my next book.
Yes.
So I feel a little bad asking this question because you said that Scott was a mirror of yourself in some ways. But one of the things that I most noticed about the books is that you have this dual goal to make Scott both likable and a real jerk. So how did you balance those two? Did you find that difficult, or?
Well, I like to write stories about people who are jerks because I think everyone is a jerk, me most of all. And I don't think it's honest to write a story that's a mirror of yourself and make it like a perfect person. So I made him as horrible as possible while still being likable. And I did the same thing with Katie. And I'll keep doing that, I think, because it's more fun for me to write something horrible and to look at myself and find the parts of myself that are just awful and that I don't ever want to tell anyone about, and then just put them in a book. So, yeah, you're right. There's like two forces pulling me apart, and I try to walk that line.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, so you basically created one of the single most amazing human beings in comic history, who I, of course, mean Wallace Wells.
Nice.
And I'm curious to know, what inspired, how you came up with the idea for the character. What inspired you to make him? Was he based on anybody? What was sort of your process with making him so, funny and great? Because I always found him to be one of the more sympathetic and interesting characters in the Scott Pilgrim story. I'm wondering how you came up with him and what was put into his character.
Well, I had a roommate at the time who was hilarious, and I was bouncing all my ideas for Scott Pilgrim off of him, and it just became really natural to include a version of him in the story. So that's basically what happened. I mean, I wrote all those jokes. It's not like I just stole his life and his dialogue, but the character's role in Scott's life is based on my old roommate Chris, his role in my life. Although we did not share a bed, and we're still really good friends. And he's he runs a big comic festival in Toronto called TCAF, which is a great festival. And he's an important person, and I'm really happy that he's so successful.
If you ever get a chance, TCAF is amazing, so I'll put that in. Yes?
Hi, you're super rad, just going to say that.
Thank you.
What are your thoughts on the connection, if you do think there is any connection, between Ramona's character, the manic pixie dream girl trope, and the idealization of women in comics?
Good question. You sound like you're from England. Well, I mean, it's another thing that it was over 6 or 7 years. So it's something where even if I started out kind of just making up a cool female character, I had a lot of time to think about it. And I had a lot of time to wrestle with the representation of women and in the comics field and in entertainment at large, and to try and make her more than just that. So I think by the end, she kind of emerges as probably a stronger character than Scott Pilgrim himself, because I just was putting all my concentration into her and trying to make her just the best I could. So yeah, I mean, I think comics in general are terrible about the representation of women, and I just would like to keep trying to do better, and so I will keep trying. But I mean, I won't. I'm not gonna like come out and say I did a great job, because I don't know if I did or not. But I keep trying. Thank you.
Yeah, you guys will be the judge. Yes.
I was just wondering, how was your relationship with your publisher? How did you meet, and have there been any problems?
That's a really big question. Well, I've had multiple publishers. Seconds is with a publisher who's new to me, Ballantine, which is part of Random House. And that's been good. Everything's been pretty good, you know. And Scott Pilgrim is with Oni Press, a smaller publisher out of Oregon, and they're also really good. I mean, I switch publishers just to kind of try new things. And you know, Scott Pilgrim, obviously, we're still doing new versions of Scott Pilgrim and stuff. So I deal with multiple publishers every day. How did I get involved with them? That's sort of like the breaking in question, and it's really. I'm trying to think of the phrase. It's like there's only like every door into the industry is like it closes behind you, and like no one else can get through it again. So it's like it's almost pointless for me to say like how I got in, but basically I just met the right person at the right time, and they liked my work.
We have time for 2 last questions. Yes.
All right, so I'm a young, struggling writer trying to get into comics, and Scott Pilgrim's a huge influence on me. And one of the things that I really love about it is that, you know, you mix this sort of magical realism with this deeply personal sort of element about relationships and just kind of everyday life. In doing that, do you have people in your life who ever kind of look at a character and like, oh, why, you clearly based this guy on me, why did you make him such a jerk, or something like that?
Well, I mean, a lot of people after Scott Pilgrim came out were like, oh, Scott Pilgrim's based on me, and they're really proud. And but none of them were correct. So yeah, I don't know. I don't other than Wallace and Stacy Pilgrim, who's based on my sister Stacy. No one's really based on anyone, and it's like not really recognizable. So I don't know. I guess not.
Yes.
Excellent. So I'm a huge fan, obviously, and a lot of times felt like Scott Pilgrim was my life, even with all the magical realism. So I'm really excited to get Seconds. Everyone should get it.
Yeah.
Who is your favorite non-main character, so non-Scott and Ramona character from the Scott Pilgrim series? First one that comes to mind.
Probably Lisa Miller from Volume 4. Yeah.
And why? Real quick.
And why? I don't know. She was cute and fun to draw, and I was working through some stuff, like high school crushes and stuff, and just kind of like exploring all that, like with some years of hindsight. So it was a fun book to write.
That was quick, so we have time for the last question right here.
Hi.
Hello. Where do you get the inspiration for the outfits that you draw?
Kind of all over the place. I mean, I often see just people on the street, and I'm like, oh my god, that's such a cool outfit. No, I don't say it to them. It's in my head. But yeah, I look around online a lot. Like it keeps changing. Like the evolution of kind of like fashion blogging online. These days, the easiest thing is like this site called lookbook.new that people just post their outfits every day, and you can just kind of look at it and get some inspiration. I don't like to copy people's outfits directly, but I just get ideas and think about what people are wearing these days, this season. So yeah, it's an ongoing process, and I find it really fun. I'm weird.
Well, thank you. How about a huge round of applause for Mr. Bryan Lee O'Malley?
Thanks, guys.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.